ग्लोबल स्किल डेवलपमेंट मिशन में आपका स्वागत है।
Okay, creating new documents, opening documents, you might be sitting there going, yeah, this is easy stuff, but there's actually some cool things that I want to show you here. Do you like your keyboard shortcuts? I love keyboard shortcuts. You could choose File New. Instead, I'm going to hit Command-N here on the Mac or Control-N over on the Windows side, and that'll bring up my new document dialog box for me. This is when I want to go and create a brand new blank document here inside Photoshop, of course. Now, inside the new document dialog box, we have a pile of options here. You could give your new document a name if you want. You could set the dimensions for your document. Now, your dimensions are going to be measured in inches, oftentimes by default, but you can go and change that. We have a variety of units of measurement that we can use. Pixels, great for web design, by the way. Inches, of course, for the world of print design. Centimeters, millimeters, and so on. Okay? So, good enough there. We also have the resolution of the file. This is something that we're going to be talking about in just a little while, but just make a mental note here. 72 pixels per inch or pixels per centimeter. That's the default there. We'll come back to this. Okay, it's important stuff. The color mode as well. This is something else that we'll talk about in just a little while. RGB, CMYK, and there's a few others in there as well. Okay? Now, if you wanted to, what you could do is you could choose a preset to create a new document off of, sort of like a template if you want to think of it like that. US paper, photo, web, film and video, and so on. Okay, but oftentimes what I'll do is I'll just come in here and I'll say, all right, I'm creating a new print document, perhaps a brochure or something like this. And Photoshop isn't the best place to design a brochure, but it's just a quick example. And I know that it's going to be 12 inches in width by, oh, who knows, 6 inches in height, something like that. Okay, and then I would simply click on OK, and the new document gets created for me, something like this. Okay, now notice that the new document appears as a new tab up towards the top here. So in other words, if I open up another file, he'll appear as another tab across the top. We can have tons and tons of different images and files opened up inside Photoshop at any given time. For example, try hitting Command or Control O on your keyboard. That's the same as choosing File Open. And if you navigate into your project files folder that I've given you, you'll have a variety of files to choose from. I'm going to grab this guy here, alwaysbrightideas.psd. And as a quick side note, .psd is the native file format for Photoshop. It stands for Photoshop Document. Okay, go ahead and pop this guy open, and as I was mentioning just a moment ago, he appears as a second tab across the top of the Photoshop interface. So now I can flip back and forth between my two files that I have opened inside Photoshop. Perhaps I want to share some resources between the two files and so on. Okay? All right. Now what I could do, if I were so inclined, is we saw this earlier with our panels. We saw that we could tear panels away and have them float in the middle of the Photoshop interface or screen. We can do the same thing here with our files. I could grab this Always Bright Ideas. I could tear him away. So now he's floating inside the Photoshop interface. And I could move him around wherever I want inside the interface. I could do this with my untitled file. I could tear him away as well and have him floating around. Notice Bright Ideas is gone. What the heck happened to him? Well, if I go to my window menu and scroll all the way down towards the bottom, there he is right there, Always Bright Ideas. He's kicking around there somewhere. You just have to go and find him. Okay? So, in other words, you can work with your files, your opened images inside Photoshop as tabs, which you saw earlier, or as floating windows. It's really entirely up to you. I prefer the floating windows, but that's a personal preference. Okay, let me show you something else here. I'm going to close out of these files. You can click on the X in the top corner, or you can hit Control or Command W on your keyboard as well to close these guys out. I love these keyboard shortcuts. Helps us move a little bit faster inside Photoshop. Okay, let me show you this. This is another one of these Photoshop pro tips that I'm going to try and jam into the course here for you. So I don't have anything opened inside Photoshop. I know that if I want to go and open a new file, I can choose File Open, or I can hit Control or Command O on my keyboard, or I can double click on this seemingly useless gray background inside Photoshop. Double click on that, and that'll open up the Open dialog box for me, where I can go and open up another file if I want to. Okay? So what I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to hold down the Shift key and I'm going to open up 3 files here. So I'm opening up Always Bright Ideas. I'm also opening up fishbowl.psd and gogetterray.psd. By the way, you can use Control or Command to select individual files as well, or multiple files really, I should say. Open those guys up, and this is what we'll wind up with. Okay, so now I have 3 document tabs running across the top of the interface: Always Bright Ideas, Fishbowl, and if you can tell me what movie this is from, then you'll have my undying respect. So there we go. There's opening up multiple files. Hopefully no big deal. Okay. Now, I mentioned this earlier that I don't really like the tabs. And again, it's a personal choice. Let me show you something here. I'm going to close out of these 3 files. Again, you can either use the X to close out of these guys, or Control or Command W on your keyboard is perfectly fine as well. Check this out. I'm going to head to Photoshop's Preferences. Now, if you're on the Windows side, head to your Edit menu. Here on the Mac, I'm going to go to the Photoshop menu, and then down to Preferences, and then I want you to go down to Interface. Choose Interface. That'll get us into the Interface Preferences, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to uncheck Open Documents as Tabs, okay? And then I'll go ahead and click on OK. Then what I'll do is I'll double-click on the seemingly useless gray background. I'm going to go and grab these 3 files one more time: Always Bright Ideas, Fishbowl, and GoGetterRay, and I'll pop these guys open. And notice that they all open now as floating windows rather than as tabs. Okay, again, it's personal preference. I could hit Control or Command N on my keyboard to go and create a brand new document, perhaps a document that's going to be 5 inches by 5 inches. Width and height there. Go ahead and click on OK, and he also opens as a floating window, like so. So there you go. There's a bunch of different ideas here for you to consider, and of course a bunch of different shortcuts as well. To finish things off, I'm going to close out of all the files that I've opened up here, again by using Control or Command W on my keyboard.